So we'll call the meeting to order. Any changes to the agenda?
I don't have any changes, but I do have an announcement. Would this be good to get that out of the way?
You do have what?
A brief announcement.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So back in, I think it was November, we talked about setting a public hearing date for the last batch of amendments that we are in agreement on. And we talked about doing it on January 21st. And as it turns out, because of the holidays, I didn't get to the process of actually creating and posting the warning through 7 days for publication on time. So I'm suggesting, if people are okay with this, that we push it back to the first meeting in February, that public hearing, because there's enough time to warn that, to meet all the statutory deadlines, and that would be February 5th, first Thursday in February. Is that
Sure. February 5th, yeah.
I
All in
won't be
agreement
here.
on doing that?
Yeah.
Yes? All in agreement?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can't make it, but
anybody else not be able to make it for sure? That we know about?
So it's February 5th.
February 5th, I'm good, yeah.
Okay, great, that's it.
Okay.
I had one question.
Yes.
Just maybe you could do a little research on this. On the DRB website, there was a subdivision application for a road. It's on the select board meeting tonight. It's 22 Park Street, and it's 1.4 acres, and it's 4-lot subdivision.
Oh.
How does that work?
Um,
There's maybe 1/4 of the lot, or 1/5 of the lot is in Jericho.
Mhm.
But do you know how that works?
Well, procedurally, if someone proposes a subdivision on the town line, they're required to post the warning not only within the town of Underhill, but in this case in the town of Jericho.
Yeah.
And all the adjoining property owners receive a mail notice, and then the town of Jericho planning office receives a notice as well. Because the idea is that if you have a project that encroaches into another town, that they need notice and they need an opportunity to weigh in. Affected property owners need an opportunity to weigh in. So if you were to put on a hard copy map, if you were to put your pen in the middle of that and just draw a radius around it, all those properties would get a notice in writing in the mail. And so they would be invited to come to the public hearing and have their say.
I'm more curious about the 4 units on 1.4 acres, is because that's not actually part of the regular bylaws yet, is it?
No, it's not.
So are they assuming that that's going to be adopted?
Could be.
It was like, I looked at that and I guess that would be a question for the zoning administrator, because I was just curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, there is a quirk in Vermont land use planning statute that says that once a public hearing has been warned to change the zoning to allow something that wouldn't have been allowed under the existing regulations, it creates a gray area zone, like in the middle, so between the existing regulations and the new regulations. So a property owner is free to propose something that would fit the new regulations, and they take a risk in doing so because, of course, there's no guarantee that the amendment will be adopted. But if it's adopted later on, then they propose something that it fits with the new standard, then they can get approval by the DRB. So that's the gray area. And there are some developers who feel confident enough about what they're doing that they'll go ahead and propose something that way in the hopes that it will work out to their benefit, but knowing that it might not.
So that is
the risk.
Yeah. So the public does know about our change to the bylaw, but it hasn't been approved yet.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, it's up that gray zone or gray area is only triggered after we warn a public hearing. So since we haven't warned a public hearing yet to change the density, whatever, it's not official yet. We're not in the gray area, but we could be very soon.
Right.
If I publish the public hearing warning on Monday in 7 days and it comes out on Wednesday, then at that point, the door will be open slightly
For anybody to go through
that process under the proposed new rules. And then, similar to the select board, once they warn a public hearing, it's again, it remains open, partially open until and unless they decide to adopt the new rules. And then from that point forward, the new rules are what's in effect, and the developer can proceed under the new rules with confidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Move on.
Yeah, move
Okay,
on.
there's no public on the screen, I guess. So we'll move on to election of chair and vice chair. Thank you, David, for putting your name in for the possible chair. And I would like to, how do we go about this? Do we nominate someone?
Yes. Yeah, I think the proper way is to open the floor for nominations for chair.
Yeah.
Hear any nominations. Somebody should second the nomination in order for it to be official. Any discussion, and then go to a vote, and then same for vice chair. And I'm going to suggest that we also, although it seems a little silly, we also have a nomination for secretary, even though staff acts as secretary, and we have somebody that records the minutes. And that's just in case, worst case analysis, both myself and the recording secretary are unavailable, that it falls back on someone in the commission to make sure that notes are kept and posted. So 3 offices would be chair, vice chair, and secretary.
Secretary. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, I'd like to nominate David for chair.
Yeah,
Secretary.
right on.
Yeah.
Way to step up.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I spoke with Larry and Brian some over the holiday time a little bit, and I know I'm somewhat newer to the board than you folks here too, but would be glad to be of additional service to this body and to the town if you guys are supportive of that. It's a little bit of extra bandwidth for me, but happy to know that I've got a good group of experienced folks with me and be able to follow the kind of example that Brian set as chair for some years. And so would be glad to accept that nomination if that's the pleasure of the body. Yeah.
Good.
Right on.
So do we have a second on that?
I'll second. I'll third.
Dude.
Okay. Yeah, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Thanks,
everybody, it's
Yeah.
unanimous?
Great. Thanks for
doing that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
So now we need
Congratulations.
a-
Thanks, Fred. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, David. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
So now we need a vice chair. I'm willing to continue there.
Yeah.
It's your pleasure to allow me to do so.
Yeah, I'll move that we nominate David to continue as vice chair of the planning commission.
I'll second that. Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Wow.
Cool. Opposed?
That was quick.
Secretary, we haven't had a secretary in the past.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody want to step on that? Roy?
Oh, I'm not very good with technology, so.
Sure, I'll take it on.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think, it really is, Larry described, like, it's only like it would be rare, I think, that you would have to undertake anything additional, but it would just be like a backup,
Just in case.
right? Yeah.
Laura's not here, and the person
It's not the entry of the executive ladder. Every point.
God, if we happen to lose,
Designated survivor.
and if we happen to lose the person that does the minutes, basically, that would be your job. Putting them together, basically. Yeah.
If that it is still the case that I'm forgetting her name that does. She does. Monica does.
Wisconsin, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's been continuing to do it. She usually doesn't join the meetings.
Right.
She watches the recording afterwards, and then she
Right.
takes her notes based on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can't lose her.
Yeah.
She's happy to keep doing it.
Yeah.
Is there an AI tool that takes notes?
There is.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So part of when I forward the meeting recording to Monica, I also include, she also can access those AI notes.
Uh-huh.
And they're, they vary in quality. I mean, I wouldn't want to, have my legal future which hits to the exact wording that comes out of that process. But often it's helpful, especially if there's there's confusion and we kind of wander around a topic. It's helpful to see those AI notes because you can sort of pick out, okay, this is the important piece, and then I can leave out the rest. Or sometimes things are out of sequence as we discuss them, and so she puts them in the correct sequence. But again, the AI notes are helpful because it at least captures some of the basics. So
does an AI secretarial work? Does that actually just do every word for it, or
Yes.
does it?
It's every word, but the accuracy is probably, I don't know, maybe 75 to 80% at best.
Yeah.
So you get some pretty strange hiccups and things like tweaks of language that like he didn't say that. You just have to listen. Sometimes you have to listen to it and then compare it to the AI notes, and then you get a better sense of what was actually being talked about than what comes out in the notes. But it's just a tool, and even 75% is better than nothing if you're having a hard time following what was being discussed. So
we need to
nomination and a second for Tim.
I'll second Tim for secretary. Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, run.
Jeff said yes.
Good. Okay,
Okay, great.
So you may take over as chair.
Yeah.
or-
Okay, yeah.
Hand over the imaginary gavel.
Yeah, we'll keep the gavel in action and in motion here. And that takes us to a discussion about the PC narrative for the town annual report. So this is something we have to get together in advance of town meeting, or what is it?
Yes.
It ships signals to people a month before?
So people are familiar with the town annual report. It's a publication, it's a booklet. And in the town annual report, all of the volunteer boards and commissions and the select board and all the departments in town government have an opportunity to sort of summarize what happened during the year with their committee or their functions, such as the road crew. And it's a useful way for people outside the little circle of us who are active in town government to know what's going on. And so because I was here for the whole year in 2025, I thought, and Brian actually said, Larry, can you write this? Asked me to write it, so I did come up with a draft. And, obviously you want to acknowledge people who served on the commission, who stepped away. You want to mention the things that the commission worked on during the year. And in this case, because my hiring was apparently a big deal for the town, at least people tell me that. I do describe that as a major milestone and a little bit about my background. And then just list the current members of the commission as of the end of the calendar year and some of the stuff that's coming up. So that's what I was trying to cover, and I'm open to people's feedback about whether I nailed it or left anything out, anything important.
I read it over. I like it.
Yeah, no, I thought it was great. Yeah. I guess there's one thing I would add, but the progress or thoughts we've had on the sewer concept, but maybe that's something we don't want to add. What are your thoughts?
I would suggest we leave that out for now, just because it's not fully cooked yet, and I don't think we want to set off alarm bells.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yeah.
Until we have a better idea of what what's going to be pursued, what's going to be practical. Because I think my take on most of the important decisions about that are going to happen no sooner than the end of 2026 and maybe into 2027. So we'll have more to say on that when we know more.
Right. Okay.
If people agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah, leaving it out is in line kind of with what the select board has asked us to do. That
okay.
Kind of pump the brakes on it a little bit.
Gotcha.
So,
right.
I get you. I think it does feel like an omission because we did talk about it quite a bit, but I don't know. Is it? Yeah, like even it's not mentioned even at like the 10,000 foot level.
just infrastructure, but
Yeah.
look at that need. Right?
Yeah.
Like a million different.
It is. Yeah.
No, I think we should leave it out. Okay.
I think elsewhere, our terms are listed as far as when they give out, when we serve two.
Yes, somewhere else in the
We don't have
town
to put them
report.
here.
No,
Yeah.
I think somewhere else in the town report
Yeah.
is that list appears, yeah, with the terms and expiration
Oh, yeah.
dates and all.
Okay. Yeah. Any other discussion on that, or is that something that we can move to approve right now? And you can, yeah. Does anyone want to make a motion that we approve this draft of the Planning Commission's year in review for the annual town report?
I'll make a motion. I'll second.
Second. Okay. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Nobody? Okay, great.
Jeff said yes.
Oh.
Zach's online too.
Oh, nice.
Hey, Zach.
Hey,
Zach, did you have a vote on that last one?
I also said aye.
Oh, great,
Okay, great.
thank you.
Cool. So that takes us to the table 3.1, section 3.19 revisions and the revisions of the prior draft that we were working on last minute, and some tweaks that we discussed at the last meeting, and this great diagram that Jeff worked on in advance of the last meeting to clarify some things about the floodplain and setbacks from streams, right, Larry?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I'm pretty sure that people agreed that, the ideas as discussed were fine, but I hadn't had time to really write them up and to revise the diagram specifically. So I spent some time, probably too much time, Microsoft Word, just sort of adding arrows and putting in little text squibs in the right places. So I just wanted to give you another look at it so that you could tell me if I got it right, or alternatively, if you feel that this still doesn't quite explain it exactly well, then we can fix it. There's suggestions for changes.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall what the main things that we talked about last meeting were about, which I see you've added in here about including the Browns River, and there were some other named brooks
Right.
that weren't included previously,
Yeah.
but this addition of and other named brooks
Yes.
kind of covers us for any stream, brook, creek, water, whatever, any kind of waterway. Yeah, or significant waterway of some significance, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only things that are not covered in this revised language are sort of seasonal streams that don't have a name on the town map. And I think that's pretty clear. And this is typical practice for all towns to say, you call out specifically all the named brooks, and then seasonal brooks or intermittent streams that don't have a name, this doesn't apply to.
Hmm.
But what do people think of the diagram? Is this clearer than what we used to have?
Looks good.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Because obviously not every river stream bed looks exactly like this, but this is sort of a typical cross section. And I think it is important, as the diagram does, to show low flow rate, where the water is at the low flow times, like summer and early fall, and then in springtime it moves up the floodplain a little bit, which has shorter setbacks, and then you have a cut bank usually on at least one side, or often you have a cut bank on at least one side, and so it's a 100-foot setback from the top of that bank. And so
Yeah, I wondered about that, but that's the way it is.
that's kind of way.
So it was just a river and more of the floodplain than the 50 foot would be on both sides. If it was.
Yes, if there's no cut bank, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I think these are minimum setbacks, but, if I had property on a stream bank, I would pull it back, any structures a lot further away than this minimum. The idea is though is that, we do have to have some standard in the regs, and this, I think the effort here with the chart, the revisions to the diagram is to show what the minimums are. And then, obviously if somebody's coming in for a building permit, zoning permit, then, they would have a chat with the zoning administrator, and the zoning administrator would probably say, well, if you really want to know what I think, here's the minimum, but you probably should set back, further than that.
Well, you can't build in a floodplain though.
That's true.
So you're assuming that buffer is from the edge of the floodplain?
Our watermark.
Well, you can build in I don't know what the town regs are, but from a floodplain regulation point of view, you can build in a floodplain. There's just certain stipulations, regulations you have to adhere to.
That's correct.
The regulations, right?
Certain regulations you have to follow. And I think Jeff is noting the distinction between designated flood hazard zones, which are spelled out in our land use regs, versus floodplains in general, which are generally part of all streams and rivers. So, for example, Browns River across the street at Moore Park, it has its sort of normal banks, and most of the time the river behaves and stays within its normal banks. But, the area where the ice rink is, and all of Moore Park is part of the floodplain for Browns River. But and if you look at the map of the flood hazard zones in the town, you'll see that most of the flood hazard zone that we have in the town is on the banks of Browns River, because the smaller streams, the regulation is more like what's illustrated in this diagram. But there are rules about the flood hazard zone, which is a separate piece of the zoning, the town plan zoning map, that says that you can build within a flood hazard zone, and for example, the gazebo structure across the road in Moore Park, but you cannot build, for example, new housing that's at a low level directly to the ground. So, I worked on this a lot in Bolton, where the area where Joyner Brook flows into the Winooski River near the foot of the Bolton Valley Access Road, that regularly gets flooded out. And there was flood damage from Irene, where the property owner said, okay, the house is ruined, but I want to rebuild on site. And so, the regulations say that you have to elevate if you're going to rebuild on site, you have to get a special permit that fits the requirements. You have to elevate all the mechanicals, the furnace, the hot water heater, the electric, at least a foot above the high flood zone, the 100-year flood line. And you have to also have the ability to have water flow through the structure, through the foundation. So you have to have like an intake window that's sort of flap that opens to allow floodwaters to come in, and then an exit structure on the other side of the foundation that allows the floodwaters to drain out. And with those restrictions, you can't build. You can't build brand new housing, but you can replace a house that got flooded if you elevate it, basically. And there are certain kinds of structures which you can build, like recreational structures, like the gazebo across the street. And then there are other things that you could never build in a flood hazard zone. So that rules, I forget exactly which section of the 2-point-something chart within the beginning of the land use regs that spells out what those rules are. But it's really only applies to a very limited land area in town on either side of the Browns River.
Did that homeowner rebuild in the floodplain?
Yes.
Yeah.
You have to have an engineer certify that the design of the proposed replacement structure fits all the FEMA guidelines for building in a flood hazard zone. So it took longer to get it approved, but they did their homework, they got their permit, and they built the house. And I went by there the other day on my way to go skiing, and I noticed a second home that was also damaged in Irene was just rebuilt, or is being rebuilt, right next to the one I just described. So you can do it, it's just, there are real limits on what you can and can't do in a flood hazard zone. Yeah.
And that 100-foot setback from a steep slope, I'm thinking of that house in Cambridge.
Jeffersonville.
Yeah, right.
Down the steep slope.
The house went down.
That was something. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, right. 100 feet's a good idea, or more.
Or more, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, those cut banks, the top of the bank illustration, those seem stable over time, and often they are, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes a force of floodwaters cuts away at the cut bank and enlarges the river, and then what seems like an adequate setback distance from the top of the cut bank is suddenly, it used to have 100 feet, now it's 30 feet. Or, in Burlington, there's a bunch of houses in the New North End that sat on top of a sand cut bank, and during flood events, the river just got closer and closer and eroded some of that sandbank, and there was at least one house was So, I think a 100-foot setback is wise and necessary, and a smart landowner will go further than that. On the other side, on the top of slope in a floodplain, you can elevate houses, and you see a lot of places around the country where houses are built up on stilts. I was just in South Florida last month, and there's a lot of that. Because it's a hurricane and high water zone. And that can pass muster. Whether it's still a good idea to build there is another question entirely.
Yeah. But I think, are we feeling good about this revision? Any more discussion on any other changes that we might need to make to this, or we might be ready to move this ahead? If we're good? Yeah.
I'm good with it.
Anyone? So we'll make a motion to approve these proposed amendments to section 3.19.d, diagram 3.1. Is there a second for that? Tim has moved. David has seconded it. And all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Okay, great. Nice, that's good. And that moves us along. We're still I gotta be right on the time, just like Ryan was. Drop the ball on that. We're just a couple minutes behind, but we're doing good, and we're gonna.
I don't know, man. This seems to be flowing way more smoothly than when the other guy was in charge, whoever he was.
The other guy.
One other guy.
We'll try to keep it smooth. That brings us to priorities for 2026 bylaw amendments as we're moving into the new year and thinking about what other changes we might tackle here in 2026.
So I didn't really have time to prepare a real detailed write-up about this, but what I did was I made a copy of the list that we generated at the beginning of last fall. And I just put a little check mark next to those things that I thought we basically agreed on and we're ready to move to public hearing. And then put a little dot next to those things that we tabled for further discussion. So certainly, has been our habit, we can come back to those in due time. But I also wanted to open up, and you'll see on the page too, I have some handwritten notes here. I wanted to open it up to the members' ideas about what else we should be focusing on in the new year. Because I think it probably gets a little tiresome to keep going back to stuff that we tabled in the past, and there might be things that people have been thinking about that need fixing in the land use regs, or which require maybe changing or updating ordinances as well that we should be thinking about, and I can start to work on and research those things as well. So there were three items there under other priorities that I thought would be natural starting points because they've been brought up before since I started working here. There were a few items under natural resource protections that we last talked about in September, I think, or October, that people seem to think would make sense to move forward, and I haven't done anything with those since, but I think it would be positive to pick up some of the recommendations from the natural resources inventory that we thought were a good idea. So those people feel like their work wasn't in vain. And then I forget who brought this up, but maybe it was you, Roy, road and driveway standards?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will confess I haven't studied those, But, if you want to say more about why you think those need fixing.
Well, I guess the one thing that came to, that when I did my little ADU was that our road ordinances are different than Jericho's. And we have the road ordinances are basically for the fire department.
Yes.
So why wouldn't we just have the same road ordinance that they do, which is slightly different, but it's like, I forget what it was. It was like, if you have more than 4 units on one
Access road.
that that you have to, wait a minute. Something about, it's the difference between a 12 and 14 foot
Mhm.
It's a
dimension.
width thing.
Because
Yeah.
right now, was that?
It's like a width thing. If there's a
Yeah,
fire.
it's pretty
Yeah.
simple, but it's like, well, why, you got the fire department and they're looking at, and they serve both towns, we should have the same road
Yes.
dimensions in the ordinance.
Yeah.
No, I'm not so sure. No,
Well, theirs is more lenient, David, so I would think you would be for it.
Oh, yeah.
generally speaking, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And also, I was thinking that we could maybe do something to recommend to the select board.
Yep.
Which would facilitate the accessory dwelling units by instead of having the driveways expanded, each time you have a dwelling unit, have the accessory dwelling units reduce or not add to the actual dimension of the driveway. So that, for instance, presently with one residence, you have 12 feet width. If you have 2 residents, it has to be 14 feet. If you have 3 residents, it has to be 20 feet.
20 feet to where,
The width of the road.
to where it splits. Because, so.
Yeah, once it's.
That's the width
Once
of the
it
road.
splits, but if you have 2 units on, like you said, 1 unit is 12 feet, 2
Yeah.
units is 14 feet.
Right.
And Jericho's is, I can't throw a blank on it. Theirs is slightly different. But,
Well, this would be a recommendation anyway. We can't do it here.
Right. It's an ordinance change.
yeah,
Right.
Right.
But we could change it or recommend anyway,
Right.
instead of having 1 residence for 12 feet, have 1 residence plus 1 ADU for 12 feet.
yeah, I think that's what
So,
theirs is.
Treated as a, yeah.
That's
so
what
it would
Jericho.
just add in the ADUs without expanding the road or driveway
Right.
requirement. But that's an expensive thing.
It is expensive, yes,
So,
especially for a longer
facilitate.
driveway. It adds significantly to the building costs, right?
Yeah.
Because, reinforcing a road to standards that would be applied to, say, 4-unit development or whatnot, requires a deeper base and a wider right-of-way and road base. So, I think you're right that it's something that has to be done in collaboration with the fire department, because, one of the main reasons for the road standards being what they are is so that the road as approved can withstand the heavy equipment of fire trucks that could be used and could be necessary in an emergency. So you want to make sure that both the road base and then the pullouts for vehicles to pass are adequate for the needs of the vehicles that are in use by the fire department. And this comes up particularly in terms of also things like grade. For example, in Charlotte, I was involved in permitting one additional house to be built at the end of a kind of a steep driveway, and the road standards said that any road driveway grades in excess of 8% could not be approved unless the house had fire suppression system, meaning it had sprinklers. And as it turns out, as we talk more about it, it seemed apparent that even though that sounds like a really oppressive requirement, it results in, if you put in a fire suppression system in a house, it doesn't add that much expense, and maybe $6,000 to $8,000 to put in a tank and a pump system and the piping inside the house with the sprinkler heads, but it actually lowers your fire insurance rate substantially, especially if you're in a rural part of town, because the fire suppression system, if it's needed, comes out like that, whereas it might take 10 or 15 minutes or longer for fire equipment to get to your house up, a long road and up a long driveway.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually is in the landowner's interest to agree to that, because over time, the savings in their insurance rates will help to equalize the cost.
On a voluntary basis.
Well, it would be something. Yeah, it would be something that if it's in the ordinance, you have to.
I know, and that's what I would not.
Yeah, but that again, that's, the select board has to make that decision.
Right.
So we would make a recommendation that's based on what we think is best from a land use planning perspective. And it's with an eye towards doing what we do with the land use regs, which is to simplify and consolidate things that are unnecessary or outmoded. And then it would be up to the select board to decide, whether they want to go along with that.
Boy, 8%, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, we're allowed 11%, I think, in our ordinance.
Yeah.
But 8%, yikes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Underhill.
I want to say too that I've heard this come up in select board meetings last year, and of course, Bob Stone, who's part of the fire department, has identified this. I think I want to say some point last summer or fall that this topic was brought up, and it seems like there's interest here this is one we want to look at in the coming weeks, for sure.
Okay.
I think we can look at it. It's a recommendation from the fire department. They're not a regulatory body. They can't dictate to us.
That's right. Yeah. That's why I'm putting it on our agenda potentially, because if we think it's a good idea to take a critical look at what we have for the road and driveway ordinance, then we can pick it up and carry the ball until such time as we feel like it's done, and then we hand it off to the select board. But we were not required to do a public hearing on it because it's a town ordinance and not a change to the land use regs. But I think if the select board agrees that this is something that needs attention and updating, then they would welcome our involvement to spearhead that. And it would require some meetings with the fire department to go over what we're talking about and make sure that we're in alignment. Because it really is safety driven. Plus we want to make sure that when we're permitting a subdivision with an access road, when we tell the property owner, you must build to this width and this standard, that we're not, we're striking a balance between what's safe and what's really necessary, because otherwise we're contributing to driving the cost of housing. If we require property owners to overbuild access roads, we're just increasing the cost that gets passed on to the buyer.
Discussion will be continued.
And depending on the size of the development, there's also Act 250 has their own driveway standards. So
that's right.
That might conflict with ours if they don't align. So maybe something to think about as well.
Absolutely.
We have a separate road ordinance.
Yes.
That we're not responsible for that. This is in the bylaws, the dimensions of the driveways is in the bylaws.
We can put in the bylaws what agrees with the ordinance.
Yeah,
but we can't put in something.
Exactly. The bylaws require that the proposed access road meet the town's standards.
Oh, okay.
And those are contained in the ordinance. So if the ordinance changes, we don't have to change that part of the bylaws because it's just a reference, like we just decided to do recently with the noise ordinance. We refer to whatever the adopted ordinance says. But it does reflect, what the town requires. And then the DRB, when it makes a decision on a project that involves building an access road or driveway, they end up being the enforcers of it. And often the fire department weighs in the later stages of approval to certify that the design meets the standard and that they can bring emergency vehicles there and as needed if the road is built to that standard.
One thing that's been in the back of my mind for 20 years now is mapping.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned that that should follow planning ordinance, but I don't see that there's anything about the mapping that would necessarily require changes or require anything, any changes in the planning and the town plan.
Yeah.
basically.
And David, so just to clarify what I meant by that is that the zoning map is considered part of the town plan. And it's not that you can't ever change the zoning map. You can, and towns do.
Yeah.
It's more that it's a more stringent procedural requirement to get approval for that. So instead of a 15-day notice, you have to give a 30-day notice and publish the proposed change. And you also have to warn all the surrounding towns in writing, because, you know, especially changes to the zoning district map that are close to the boundaries of nearby towns, they may object to, you know, a change that we would propose, because if you're moving a zoning district line, you know, it may impact their community as well.
Oh, okay, but that
So-
follows, you know, something that we would actually have down as a proposal, basically.
We would initiate it,
Yeah.
and it would go through a similar process, except with longer timeframes to notify. And it would be considered, if we approved a change to the zoning district map, any of the boundaries of the zoning district map, it would go through a similar process like we do public hearings for land use amendments. And then we would publish it. If approved, it has to be approved by the select board as well. And it would, like any changes to the town plan, it would have to go to regional planning as well to be reviewed. And, you know, regional planning probably wouldn't get involved at any significant extent. It's just, it's a box that they have to check, you know, that they reviewed it. Because what they don't want is towns making willy-nilly changes to their zoning maps in ways that would affect surrounding towns without it going through regional review process.
Put a industrial district right next to their whatever.
It's been done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't think my idea anyway is that we wouldn't be making any real significant changes, just making them clear as to where they are, mostly running along the boundaries of individual properties.
Yes.
And with large parcels, we would have to make some decisions and probably talk to the landowners perhaps and so on.
Yeah.
But it's something that I sort of like to get going on, right?
Yeah. Well, we've called out some things that don't really make sense already in the zoning map. You know, for example, the size of the village districts, you know, is very constrained. And, you know, pushing out the boundaries of the village districts, not a whole lot, but enough to encompass nearby properties that are already developed, you know, makes sense to me as a planner.
Yeah.
And also, you know, we've had some complaints from people where zoning district boundary runs right through the middle of their property. And on one side, they can do things that they might want to do, and then on the other side of that district line, they can't do anything because of the way that the rules are written. And you know, right now, the basis for a lot of the boundaries outside the two village districts is distance from a road or distance from a river or a stream, and you know, doesn't reflect current practice. So I guess the question would be, you know, do we want to go through and look at where the lines cut through properties now and realign the district lines to conform to property lines? Because, you know, that's going to make some people very happy potentially and really piss other people off. And it is, the way things are now with the district lines cutting through the middle of properties is that you have two different sets of rules, right? You know, so you have, you know, one set of rules that applies to one side property on one side of the line, and a different set of rules that applies to property on the other side of the line. So if we were going to make that kind of change, we have to be really thoughtful about it and very careful that, you know, we're not curtailing any property rights that have been in place for a long time for people who might want to do something with their property and always assume that they could do something with their property, and then we move the line and all of a sudden they can't.
Yeah, typically, you know, unless there's some good reason not to, I would say go on the more lenient side for the property owners. Yeah. So
that, like, if the boundary goes through their property, they should be able to use their whole parcel according to the rules of the more lenient district.
Like half of it's in a 3-acre zone, the other half is in the 15-acre zone.
Right.
Make it all a 3-acre zone, unless there's some good reason not to.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of the village boundaries too. Larry, can you remind us where did we land with that? I know that was a conversation that we went back and forth. We had the CCRPC folks here, and that's kind of tabled effectively, or like
The one thing that did change was, I think the Regional Planning Commission has now adopted the future land use map, including Underhill's part of that, for the whole county. And part of that was saying that the areas that we identify as being part of the village, the 2 village districts, are considered to be, fixed and represent what Underhill wants to do going forward. But they also said, and this is a broad brush thing for the whole county, for all municipalities, they said that areas within, I think it's a quarter mile of the village district boundaries could be considered as for future development, but they didn't authorize that. They said it's up to us to decide whether we want to adopt that. So they just basically left that door open. They didn't throw it open. They just left it open a crack and said, should any towns want to expand their village district definitions out in that quarter mile outside of the existing boundaries, that we were free to do so whenever we felt ready to. So that's where it stands right now. They're not, essentially they're saying we're not going to contest if Underhill decides to push out a quarter mile from the existing village district boundaries. We will approve that if Underhill wants to make that change, but we haven't made that change yet. So,
but that's their guidance. Yeah,
that's their guidance, and partly was to recognize that you want to give municipalities some room for growth, without making them jump through a lot of hoops in order to achieve it. And then I think where that stands is that the Regional Planning Commission approved that future land use map for the whole county, and now it's good when at some point in the near future it's going to go to the State Land Use Review Board, which was just created last year, and they're going to review the regional plans from all the communities around Vermont, and thumbs up or thumbs down, probably thumbs up in most cases.
Thumbs up as far as we could do the quarter mile outside where it already is. That seems like something we should do, actually. Looking at the map, it seems like that would open up a lot of opportunities. If you look at the village center and you expand it out, that people would have more opportunities to
absolutely
higher density.
I think we were in agreement when we talked about that the last time.
Yeah.
Moving it out, maybe not a quarter of a mile, but yeah.
And that relates to the other one of these points marked with a dot on the front about specifying a maximum residential density distinct from minimum lot size in all zoning districts. And that's one that I'm keen on us taking up more. I know we've discussed it in the context of the village district specifically, but in the context of CCRPC and these targets for housing growth and wanting to foster an environment where we can have smart development in the villages, but not let it spill into the other districts. The density seems like a good one to be able to say, here's how we can ensure that if you're in the conservation or the rural residential district, that it's not going to
be lower density.
That's how we can kind of cap things while at the same time trying to provide mechanism for higher density where we want it, but making sure that lot sizes or like the idea that David brought up about the evil corporation that would sell a piece of the pie in a 20-acre lot or 15-acre lot out in the sticks more, and then effectively make it a little subdivision because it's still one lot. But if we have density limits in place, that would effectively or that would help to
you could specify low density district. So and so the way this would actually play out is if we adopted this kind of change, it would be a new line in table 2.1. So right now we don't have those limits, those density maximum number of units per acre or whatever, and so it would allow us to change the standard all across the board, specify maximum number of units per acre or whatnot for all the zoning districts.
So if you were in the rural, residential district, you know, the 3-acre district.
Yeah.
You wouldn't increase the density on each lot.
I mean, we get into it when we start talking about what's the right level. You know, the rural residential seems to me to be sort of big picture. It's a medium density zone in terms of how it's developed now and what's allowed there. And you know, we don't have an industrial zone in town or commercial district, right? So, you know, if development is going to happen, it seems like, you know, the rules for the rural residential district are, you know, sort of a mix of things, but that they do allow commercial developments along Route 15. And so they're, you know, to the extent that Underhill is ever going to have no commercial development, it's probably going to happen there. But then the question would be, how should it be regulated? Because the rules are not really all that clear now.
Right. But that's kind of our de facto industrial district is Route 15, because that's where you could have a sawmill right now.
For example.
Right.
So a maximum residential density district. So that would, I would think that would be, you know, the town centers basically.
Well, I think as David just described it, it's a tool for regulating that could apply to all districts, or, you know, you could selectively adjust the number for the type of density you want to limit in each district.
Yeah.
But,
like,
you know, that's not really what this is saying, I don't think.
No, because when I wrote this, it was more oriented towards the villages. But, you know, this is a tool that you can apply outside the villages as well.
So we're back to the repeal the one house per lot size.
Right. Well, we tabled that.
Yeah. Well, we tabled it, but
we decide should be appropriate.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you could still have the lot sizes, the lot size minimums for each district, but then the density would be an additional layer.
Actually, no. If you do away with this, you repeal that section basically, which you have to do this, I believe.
No.
We'd have to look at it, I think, right? Yeah.
All right, we'll have to look at language.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a little confused here because right now we have the 3, 5, 10, 15 acre districts.
Yeah.
And in each of those districts, then we have the village center.
Right.
But in each of those 3, 5, 10, 15 acre districts, you're allowed to have a duplex, or you're allowed to have a single family home and an accessory dwelling.
Correct.
So are we talking about adding more units or diminishing the lot size in those districts, or?
So minimum lot size generally comes up when in the context of a subdivision, right? Because if you have like a 50-acre lot and it's a 5-acre zoning, and theoretically you could get 10 lots out of that.
Right. Yeah.
But in practice, you know, the property owner may not propose that many lots to be housing lots to be subdivided, and you know, the town has no hard limit. You know, so we're not going to tell somebody, well, you can only put X number of units in that district. So what we're talking about here is adding a new line to the table 2.1 that specifies the maximum number of units in that district per acre.
Well, that is specified. We look in you go farther on to the into the regs, and when you start looking at the planned unit development, they talk about the required density that is not beyond what it's defined as, and it's defined as one principal dwelling per lot size in different districts. So it'd be one principal dwelling in a 10-acre district. And that's referred to when you go into the planned unit developments. You can't do more than one principal dwelling.
You can
with a planned unit if you've got 50 acres in a 10-acre zone.
Yeah.
You can crowd in to
Yes.
that area.
Cluster them, makes a lot of lots.
But you can't go more than, if it's 50 acres in a 10-acre zone, you can't go more than 5
units. Right.
principal
Yeah.
units.
That's where we're at right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're
So
thinking,
you're suggesting something else here. You would have to change that also, in the, that area. And then we're going to get into, people asking the question, well, see, this is a 10-acre zone, right? Yeah, but you can put 10 houses in there. It's okay. Don't worry about it. What? You mean a 10-acre zone means you can put 10 houses in?
There's definitely a
a
relationship between these two concepts, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not prepared to say definitively that, this new line item that we're talking about would necessarily change or improve things. I would need to look more at that, 'cause I think you make good points, and I don't fully understand the implications of this without understanding the subdivision rules, which I admit I haven't really spent a lot of time on.
Yeah. When are we directed to update the town plan?
So the town plan is not due to be revised or required to be revised until 2029. And typically, we would start that process about 2 years out from the due date. So that would be next year, 2027, that we would jump into that and start working on that in earnest. It's not to say that we have to wait until 2029. So to go back to the earlier discussion, we could update the zoning district map before that as a separate piece and go through that whole warning process, the whole required process to do that. But the 2029 deadline is for a significant update. And what will have changed, regardless of what else we want to change, is that the state statutes will drive certain changes in terms of things like housing density and housing targets, and also some conservation pieces as well, because the state is really just now writing the rules for preserving old growth forest habitat and contiguous forests, and among other things. And it's anything that changes at the state level in terms of policies needs to be reflected in our town plan as it's updated. So that's nothing to shake a stick at. I mean, we can't even know today what all that will be 2 years from now, or a year and a half from now. But we need to start our thought process going by the middle of next year at the latest. And we do have and can count on help from the Regional Planning Commission, because one of the things that they do for no charge to us automatically is that when we're approaching that 2 years out deadline, they will give us a very detailed write-up of how they feel our current town plan works and is okay to keep as is, and what parts of it need to be changed, or we should think about changing. And they will give us this document at least 2 years out. So sometime next year, we can expect that from them. And they're more than able to provide us with technical assistance to accomplish anything that they say needs changing. And often it's typical for towns as well to ask for a municipal planning grant to get help from consultants to help revise and update the town plan. And we would probably do that.
And how does it work as far as our directive with the town plan? The town plan is kind of a master plan or a strategic plan for what we're doing, right? So if we're introducing something that's potentially contrary to what the plan has stated, like changing the zoning or the density on lots that has been conveyed previously, that's not something that the town wants to do. How do you balance that as far as is it the cart before the horse, or did you have to introduce that change to the town beforehand?
I think it's a really good idea to introduce the conceptual changes to the town ahead of time. And with this municipal planning grant that we got for this year, we can start that conversation. So if we've identified some aspects of the policies in our current town plan that we think need to change, then we can embed those things in the surveys that we're going to be doing, and ask people how they feel about it. and we can also ask open-ended questions like, if you were king of the world or king of Underhill, what would you change in terms of how, you know, we regulate development in town? You know, are there things that we should be planning for that are not really strong enough in the current town plan? And if so, you know, what policies would you like to see the town adopt? You know, and some examples would be pro-housing policies, flood resilience, you know, adapting to climate change, adapting to demographic changes like the aging population and the, you know, the housing affordability issues. You know, those are all things that could be perhaps played up in the next edition of the town plan. And, you know, some things we'll just have to deal with regardless. Like,
Right.
you know, we have control over climate change,
Right.
but we are subject to what happens, you know, here with global warming and with increasing floods and increasing ferocity of storms.
Mhm.
So, you know, it doesn't really matter whether we want to address it, we have to address
Right,
it.
or when the plan was written, there wasn't the imminent discussion of the housing crisis, and then
That's right.
the state has kind of addressed that and was pushing it forward for us to address at the town level, so
That's
it's being
right.
asked to be addressed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and a lot of Underhill, you know, so much of our town is zoned for conservation, which is a great thing. But, you know, we're going to want to look at in the next update for the town plan, do the rules that we have for the conservation districts align with where the state is going with protecting what they call tier 3, you know, wildlife habitat and forest blocks and wildlife connectors and all that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Because it should, you know, if it doesn't align with new state policies and requirements, then, you know, landowners might find themselves caught in this no man's land between what the town's rules are and what the state rules are going to be or are headed. And we don't want to put people in that position. That's not a good thing. So we want to make sure that we proceed, you know, as much as possible in alignment with the state, but it should be always driven by our values, you know, and that's the thing that a lot of people miss about the town plan is that it should, at its core, it's a policy document. It's saying how people of Underhill want to see the town develop and what restrictions we want to put on development and what are the emerging issues that we think it's most important for the town to address in our regulations. And that's inclusive of all of our regulations, including things that are adopted by the select board as ordinances. So, you know, people look to the planning commission to spearhead that conversation. And, you know, the typical town plan update process includes public meetings where, you know, you have some blue sky thinking. You encourage people to think out loud about things that they would like to see happen in town or things that are not happening that should be called out in a town plan. Because, you know, obviously the policy document has goals. It has objectives that arise from those goals, and it has implementation plans, specific actions that you take that arise from each of the objectives that are adopted. Otherwise, it doesn't mean a whole lot. It's just a lot of words on paper. Right? And you know, that's in squarely on our shoulders as a planning commission to spearhead those conversations. So it'll be an interesting process. You know, I think a lot of times towns experience this requirement to update their town plans every 8 years is kind of a burden, and it's not supposed to be a burden. You know, it's supposed to be an opportunity more than anything to get more back in the driver's seat about how we want to see the town change and grow over the years.
What we call it, the young guy who wrote it the last time, so he's still available.
Yeah, do that, or get someone totally new.
Yeah, there was an outside party kind of that directed the drafting of
He was
it.
involved with the planning department. I think he's a young guy out of
Outside
school.
consultant.
He put together, he wrote most of it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
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 And like I said, it's not unusual to have an outside consultant actually do the writing, but
Mhm.
they should only do the writing after they hear from the town what people want to do.
Yeah.
It's to be driven by policy and goals and objectives.
Well, we did kind of start moving into maybe some ideas for how CCRPC could help us, which is the next item on the agenda. But is there anything else, Zach and Jeff too, that is maybe not on this list of priority tasks that we want to look at in the coming year? from this list that Larry's put together, and then maybe one last, can you remind us what the STR registration?
Short-term rentals.
Okay. Oh yeah, that was one that we talked about at the end of last year that we wanted to take up and we haven't yet. So
That's
I
right.
think,
Yeah.
I think I don't see any on here that I don't think are of interest, but I know, the density, the roads and driveways, the natural resource inventory, and the short-term rental registration ordinance are some, and I think, we can continue to develop this list, but does anyone else have any others that aren't on this list that we want to include as we kind of start to map out our agendas for the coming months?
This is Jeff. I can't think of anything, but I don't have a copy of that either. It's not online, so I'm kind of in the dark with respect to whatever is on there to begin with. So.
Yeah, we'll get you this list. I think, they look familiar to you, Jeff, but
I'm sure they will. I just don't have it in front of me to reference. So, I mean, I don't have anything I can think of off the top of my head either. So just as we go, stuff up.
Yeah, no worries. We can continue to add to it, but I think there's a good chunk of items here at least to get us started. Yeah. Does everyone agree with that? I think there's no official action for us to take right now, but yes. I think this has been a good discussion around.
Through added mapping, I guess.
Yeah.
Mapping?
Yeah. When you say the mapping, is that separate from the natural resource mapping that was done?
Yeah, it's separate entirely. It's clarifying the boundary districts.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good one that we should definitely take up.
I think that's presently we've got a what it is now, hand drawn 1970s.
Yeah,
it's really old.
Yeah. It'd be nice to get a new map.
Yes,
but that all sounds good. These are good topics.
Okay. I was just looking for guidance, because here we are with a new year. And, I think we made really good progress in plowing through the list of things that we came up with, the to-do list at the beginning of the fall. So, we have some lingering items from that list, but I think it helps me to kind of get my head on straight. Yeah. So what I'm going to do for next step on this would be, to pull out the things that we've already done, and then, maybe reprioritize or reorder the things that were tabled. Some of the things that were tabled, I might just drop. It seemed like we were not even close to agreement on them, and then add these new things, and then bring it back to you as a proposal, and we can further winnow or reprioritize that revised list once I've had a chance to sort through some of this stuff.
Okay,
that makes sense.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe at the next meeting even, or maybe after the hearing, that we could look at a more refined list, and then we can start getting into details on some of these specific topics. But that sounds great.
Okay.
And that brings us to the ideas for CCRPC staff help in 26-27, and brainstorming some ideas about how we can best leverage the folks at regional planning to help us accomplish some of this stuff in the coming year.
Yeah, so let me just introduce this, because this is a little vague, as it sits on the agenda.
This is something.
So every year, Regional Planning Commission goes through this process called the Unified Work Program planning process. A lot of words, a lot of syllables. UPWP. But basically what it is, they're a big agency. They have 40 or 50 people who work there. If you haven't been to their offices, it's
that many.
It's a lot of people. Yeah. And they have a really big budget. A lot of their budget comes from federal transportation dollars, because they are designated as the only metropolitan planning organization in the state, which means that they coordinate the planning and building of all road projects in Chittenden County. And they get direct funding from the Federal Department of Transportation for a lot of that. All the federal aid roads, Interstate 89, US 2, US 7, and a lot of the state highways as well. So every year they go through this UPWP process, and what they're essentially doing is they're asking all of the member communities for their ideas and requests for what they should be spending their staff time on for the new fiscal year that starts July 1st, 2026. Because they then create this enormous spreadsheet and they say which projects they've agreed to and how much staff time is going to be devoted to them. And that's based partly on the pipeline of existing transportation projects, but then also on requests from member communities. Mm-hmm. And so I did print out some copies here from their memo about describing the program, where they give examples of projects, and they kind of fall into three broad categories. So the three broad categories are, four: transportation-related projects, and then the second category is land use and energy assistance, implementation assistance, and then the third category is transportation counts, like traffic counts, and pavement and sign inventories. And then the last category is non-municipal transportation partner program assistance, which is another form of transportation budgets. And it's typical for small towns to request help from CCRPC, for example, in doing culvert inventories, because the capacity of road culverts is often an issue with respect to flood resilience, right? The culverts that are not adequately sized wash out, causing roads to wash out, causing multi-million-dollar projects to have to be built. So they help towns inventory what they have for road culverts, identify undersized culverts, and make a plan to increase the size of culverts so that they can withstand flash floods and other similar events. Or, they want to look at highway signs and bridges that are obsolete and need to be replaced. And, if it's in the plan, if they put something in the plan for towns that need that kind of support, then it becomes part of their work and their budget to help the town do it. So we're going through this process now to replace bridge number 7, I think, of Browns River. And, we obviously want to take advantage of whatever the RPC can do to help us with the cost of designing and building that replacement bridge. So those kinds of projects are pretty typical to requests. But then under the planning arena, you have things that, for example, developing smart growth plans for communities, developing corridor plans. So, a town that has identified a need for bike paths along a town road or a state road, they can provide funding for those kinds of projects. So like if we decided that we wanted to create a pedestrian path, a pedestrian multi-use path along River Road that links the Flats Village with Underhill Center Village, we could ask for their help to sort that out. And it could be just scoping, it could be actual design work, and they would, if they agree to put it in their plan, they would fund that. So it wouldn't be out of the town's pocket. They would do all the investigative work to figure out the feasibility of it. They would make a plan for right-of-way acquisition, and they could potentially, maybe next year or the year after, if we want to go forward with that, they could potentially fund the construction of that multi-use path. So that's something that a lot of towns have done. Education and outreach to increase awareness and understanding of local, regional, and state energy and climate plans would be another one. So I think Underhill adopted a energy addendum to our town plan, and if we wanted to move forward with implementing some of that, such as promoting the use of more solar panels on existing homes and commercial structures, we could ask for their help with that.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
You were just talking about the multi-use path, or a bike path.
Yeah.
Where does the interest in that start? Are we the ones that would be the one that we would throw the idea out there and apply for a grant? Yeah,
and at the front end, it may just be nothing more than a nice idea, right? But if we want to pursue a nice idea like that, this is a good place to start, because again, they would provide professional help with scoping, with right-of-way acquisition, with design, identifying funding sources. That would all be part of the package. But it has to start somewhere, and if we think it's a good idea, we tell them, and it's part of this application that's due at the end of this month, and then they would decide what to do with it. And if they decide to incorporate it into their annual plan, then it begins to gather some momentum.
Mm-hmm.
Things related to energy are definitely could be done. For example, if there was an interest in town in having more electric vehicle charging stations and that kind of infrastructure, that could be part of a request. If there was an interest in repurposing underutilized public buildings for community centers, senior centers, or childcare spaces, or multi-use spaces for communities to use, that could be part of the request. So it's pretty wide open. And in the past, Underhills, my understanding is that most of our requests have been pretty limited, mostly related to sort of typical road and infrastructure kinds of inventories and requests. But I think I'm just putting it out to you now, because by the end of the month, if we want to submit a request for this kind of planning assistance, that's when the application is due. And it's a very simple application. We just have to say what we want help with and how much help we want, and what we hope to be the outcome of it, basically. And then it goes into the mix, and regional planning decides what they're going to do with the request. They could just ignore it, or they can incorporate it into their plan, or they could say, well, it sounds like a nice idea, but we don't have resources for or time for it this year. Yeah, that's what this is.
What do you think we should do?
Well, I personally like the idea of asking for help with planning a multi-use path along River Road to link the two villages, because I feel like it would be used. It's a route that runners and cyclists use now. It's very scenic. The town owns the right of way, and I think there are opportunities for that. It would be a heavy lift, because in a lot of places houses are built very close to the road. But there are ways to make those kind of paths go around the backside of properties rather than right next to the road. So in some places it would be just a matter of widening the road a little bit so there's safe shoulders, and in other places it might actually have to require right of way. And RPC actually did a study of what that would look like in this village, in the Underhill Center Village. There's already
it was
a report on
that.
I thought they were going to build that.
Yeah, just between here and the central school, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that was something the select board was on about early last year, and I don't know where they got to with that, but that, I remember that too.
Right. So if you're going to do that in the village here, why wouldn't you think about connecting, just extending it to the Flats district? Because the idea here is to create safe routes to school for, in this case would be for middle school students to get from Underhill Center to the Browns River Middle School, and also to just create safe passage for cyclists and wheelchair users and just people running along the road. Because right now it's not safe.
Yeah, it's not safe.
Yeah, not safe at all.
That would have broad support in the town, I'm pretty sure.
I would think so.
That'd be a great
I
idea.
think that'd be number one, really.
Yeah, and it piggybacks on work they've already done, because, right now, the little path through the Underhill Center Village sort of ends by the store, by the Wells store.
Right.
And, it seems silly to start building a path that people will use and then just have it stop.
Yeah. Was that, do you know why the continuing into the central school, did that stall out with the select board at some point? Or was it, there were like federal funds that they had to use, or they had?
That was not
Was it
ARPA funds, I don't believe.
ARPA fund. There was something about using up ARPA funds for
the path. I
for
thought
the
that was
path.
already going to happen. It's not going to happen now? Or-
I think it is. I admit that I'm not certain where that landed, but that it was of discussion and
I don't know.
yeah.
I mean, I know the report's complete, and it's available on the town website. You can open it up and look at, the maps that they drew about where the path would go.
Mm-hmm.
But it hasn't been funded yet, and there's no plan to actually build it as proposed. But, if that's something we think is a good idea, we can push for that. We can push for, the scoping is done now with a report. But then the next step would be, right-of-way acquisition, explore right-of-way acquisition, and an additional step would be a project to extend the path all the way down to the Flats alongside River Road.
Yeah. And it's not like if we put it in an application, it's not like we're all.
No.
It's just to explore that, to be able to do studies to see what it would cost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Could
I
you
like that.
Could you? Because I recall that a couple of years ago, I don't know if anybody else does, that we did have a discussion about this, and that the study was done, and then we applied for a grant to extend it to flats, and we did not get the grant. Or would you mind asking Brad about that, because he probably knows, and then, because I think there would be a lot of interest in that in town.
Was that for ARPA funds though?
No, I think it was for this same thing.
The CCRPC.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Well, they're two separate things, aren't there? There's one for the center, and
yeah,
then
I think we didn't get the
we
grant
need
for
the other
to
also.
extend it, or.
And then we get that. If we get that approved, then have them both hopefully funded, or largely funded by the
Or, yeah, could we?
by
Maybe
whoever's throwing the money out.
Yeah.
figure
Yeah,
it
and
out?
part of it too is thinking about this on a more regional level, right? So it's like, where do people bike long distance that passes through our town? And are there existing networks of like wider shoulders, for example? I think probably yes, in along Route 15 in Cambridge, right? There's pretty wide shoulders there. So it's safer to bike along Route 15 in Cambridge than it is in Underhill.
Safer to bike on a dirt road, right, Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, RPC likes projects that connect up existing, paths that can be utilized as multi-use paths and trails with new stuff that will extend the network out, because they love to present a big regional map that shows, here's all the ways that you can get around by bike, and safe places to run and walk, and then are connected with each other. Because a lot of times, these segments are not connected with each other.
Right.
And then it's like, if you're an avid cyclist and you come to these dead ends, it's like, that's not what
Put your
you're
life in danger to get to the
Exactly.
next section.
Yes.
Well, it sounds like there's the support to maybe include that in an application about a path. There might be other items we want to add if we have till the end of the month. I want to be mindful of the time too, but is this something that we should check in about again? How do people feel about, you can think about it, maybe we do want to include an energy piece or ways to encourage solar or car charging stations, but for sure looking at paths is something that we'd want to include on this by the end of the month. But we do have another meeting between now and when the deadline is, that we could refine this further. But
well, our next meeting is on a Wednesday night, and the proposal is due that Friday.
Okay,
So not a lot of time to work on.
So would you have time to put it together? And
Well, that's why it's on the agenda tonight, because I wanted time to think about it.
okay.
Yeah.
Can you think of anything else that you think we should address, or?
This is a very inclusive list of what we could ask for help with, and I'm not familiar enough, for example, with what the town energy committee has worked on to know, what their interests are. I could certainly ask.
Yeah, I guess that would be one just hole in the picture right now.
I think, that really this possibility of expanding the path on the flats is something that I think everybody would agree to that.
Yes.
Actually, I think that's the number one thing.
Yeah.
I think we
maybe
could
we
agree
just
to
wanna
that
focus
tonight.
on that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
let's
Larry,
move that.
we could move forward with
Yes.
preparing that application
Yep.
with,
Yeah,
and I mean, we don't need to do more than that. Like,
Right.
that would be a great thing to get, to move ahead with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So you would just be
Yeah.
asking for funds to study?
It would be, in planning lingo, it's a scoping project. So we're asking them to do the similar thing that they did for the village paths here in the Underhill Center Village, to just say, extend it out along River Road down to the Flats District.
See how logical it is.
Yeah,
Okay.
makes sense.
No, that's a great idea.
Do we need a motion for that, or is
I don't
that
think so. It's
something
really,
that-
I'm just looking for guidance,
Yeah.
prepared application.
That's
we all
good.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Okay, cool. Well, then, with that sounds great. That's exciting. And then last piece before we set out is to approve the meeting minutes from the December 18th, 2025 meeting. Does anyone have any changes to the December 18th minutes?
I forgot to include some of the details on the table.
Do you want a list of all the foods that were available?
Yeah, maybe we need to get that
Too
in
much of
there.
everything.
Yeah, we did have a
What
lot.
I remember.
We're gonna revise that for next year, but it was a great spread though, we'll say.
Yeah,
Note that it was a great spread. With that, then, can I, ask, would anyone make a motion to approve the December 18 minutes?
So moved.
So moved and second.
Seconded.
Bart, I'll give it to Bart this time. All those in favor of approving the December 18 meeting minutes?
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
I,
Yeah. Okay, that's great. And with that, then this part will still be the same. There's one last piece to do here.
I'd like
David,
to make a motion that we adjourn.
would you do it? Seconded. Roy's got the second on adjourn. All those in favor of adjourn? Aye.
I.
Opposed? Nay. Okay, great.
On the button.
Okay, cool. All right. I'm glad I got